And he's in Kansas, and he says hello, and he joins us right now. Billy, good afternoon. How are you today, pal? What do you have?
Doing well, doggy. How are you?
All right, Billy, nice to talk to you. What's on your mind now? Let me hear.
I was just going to tell you, you've been railing on old Steve Torrey pretty hard lately for not keeping up with the books and the articles and the movies and the such. Did you read the article about the Spurs? Because had you read that, you would know his name is Kawhi and not Kyrie.
I know it's Kawhi. I can't pronounce. That's a mispronunciation thing, Billy, more than anything else.
Poorly produced.
Yes, I like to say Kawhi Leonard.
Come on.
I did watch Popovich last night with his press conference, and I could tell he doesn't know what to tell you. I mean, the bottom line is it sounds like the Spurs think he's able to play.
Are you finished?
And it sounds like he is. Yeah, I'm finished. You may continue. Go ahead.
You have a good day.
All right, Billy. I was going to give you a chance to add, but not the case. That's fair enough. Here's Frank in Colorado. Mad Dog Unleashed. Frankie, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks for asking. You know, Chris, in life, to me, integrity matters, and I think it does to most decent people out there. And I think that's the issue that I have with what Mark Cuban said and what he did, what he's doing, and to the whole nature of tanking. Now, if you do want to tank, or if you want your team to be able to acquire a high draft pick, I think you have to have some integrity about it, in the sense that trade away the assets that you got that you don't see that are in your long-term picture. If you have to replace it with subpar talent, you do so. But when you put people out on the court, they should be giving 100%.
Yeah, they should try to win. I agree. They should try to win. The Knicks are in that spot right now because the Knicks, have traded away a couple of players, number one. The Knicks are not going to play the Jarrett Jacks of the world anymore. They're going to sit there and play their young kids and see what it develops. And the Knicks, there's a countdown in the New York papers about how many games the Knicks can lose so they can get put in a lottery. They have their first-round pick. They know they don't got Porzingis for a long time, so that they don't feel that Hornacek, a lot of Knicks fans feel they won't be back next year anyway. So nobody's trying to save the coach. So as a result, let's lose as many as you can in the next 23, get as many ping pong balls as possible, and then go out there and get a lottery pick. So that's right in front of Adam Silver's coffee every morning on Fifth Avenue, because that's in the New York papers. I mean, they got charts about how many what the Knicks possibilities are to get lottery picks, and that's bad. I mean, that is bad for the NBA. And the NBA, the original theme about the lottery is you wouldn't lose on purpose to get the number one pick, because there would be no guarantee you'd get the number one pick, because everybody would be in the same boat who didn't make the playoffs, they'd have a chance to secure it. But the issue is there's a talent gap in the NBA that if you don't have the talent, plugging along to win 38 games compared to winning 20, you're better off winning only 20.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick, if you'll allow me, is the whole Mark Cuban thing with the sex scandal. It's absolutely, it makes no sense to me. I'm a modestly successful businessman. I have 2 different businesses. I know what's going on. I'm nowhere close to the skill level of some of these upper executives and stuff, but I know what's going on in my companies. Now, if it's anywhere close to what they're saying was going on in that environment, there's no way that Mark wouldn't have known what was going on. And if he did know, he should have did something, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. This whole Me Too movement, I don't know exactly what I think about it, but no woman deserves to be treated like that in the workplace. And there's no way that Mark, in my opinion, didn't know what was going on.
Again, who knows? He only can answer that if it was a lower employee who, they got a lot of employees for the franchise. They who work in Dallas. There's got to be 600-700 of them. If it's somebody that we're not that familiar with, I can live with it. This guy was the CEO of the company, business side, for better part of 18 years. I mean, there's no excuse. If you didn't know, you should have. It almost comes across as Patino with the sex skate there right across the Billy Donati's hall. his old buddy Billy Donati, from the 9/11, with the women and the kids and the recruits and everything else. And right under Rick's nose, he went to bed, looked at tape, and hit the sack, and they're having a sex romp 5 feet away. And he said he didn't know about it. Same thing with Cuban. Cuban was too wrapped up in doing Shark Tank and doing all these shows. And Cuban likes a celebrity. He loves that celebrity deal. He made $1 trillion. He won his championship. Team is lousy. Cuban likes to be seen. He loves that. That's very important to him. And, likes to comment. He likes to be out there. He likes to be heard. He likes to be, in everybody's consciousness. That's what Cuban likes. And you wonder if he, the franchise got away from him a little bit, where he didn't do the day-to-day diligence that good owners do. And I think that's a factor here. And again, to me, he no longer has a chance, in my eyes, he no longer has a chance to comment about what everybody else is doing. Because, whether that's Donald Sterling or Donald Trump, he's out. Because he no longer has a chance. He owns the team. I'm not saying he's got to sell the team, but nobody wants to hear from him right now. When you had this guy running around your offices for the better part of 2 decades, harassing women on all phases, and you didn't know what was going on, and you own the team, and you go to every game, that's a problem. Yeah, here is Ron in Michigan, and he's with us here on Mad Dog Unleashed. Ronnie, good afternoon. How are you today?
Hey, Doug, kind of quiet day, and I heard you've talked about this before. I want to give you my top 5 Pistons of all time. They've won 3 championships.
All right, top 5 Pistons. Go ahead, shoot.
All right, let's go. Isaiah Thomas first. Dave Bing second. I don't know about this one. Bob Lanier.
Yeah, he's got to be there.
Yep, that's what I thought. And Dumar's 4. And then I think my 5th is kind of tough, but I'm going to go Rodman because he was huge with the Bad Boys, and there's a lot of other guys. So what do you think of that for my top 5 Pistons?
I don't want to put Rodman in if I can avoid it. I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back and look at the old Piston players. Lanier and Bing, obviously, are 2 that you'd have to consider. Right. They did not win a championship until Chuck got there, and Isaiah. I had, the Dumars, you have that covered. Lambeer is not on that level. James Edwards is not getting here. Norris Dantley or Aguirre.
What about Vinnie Johnson?
They're a long time. You could. Vinny's not a Hall of Famer. Rodman is for doing one thing great. It's a very tricky call, that 5th Piston. I'd have to go back and look. Was there a Piston in the old days? You're not going to give it to Dave DeBuscher. Was there a Piston in the old days that we are forgetting?
No, the only 2 I can think of was, I thought about DeBuscher too, but I thought he was more of a Knick than a Piston.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, no, I don't. Lanier and Bing, that's it.
Are we putting the Fort Wayne Pistons into the mix, or is it just the Detroit Pistons?
I'll just stick with Detroit, Dougie.
When did they get to Detroit? Anybody know? Mid-'60s?
I think it was really. They started out playing at Cobo Hall.
Yeah, I know they did. We'd have to look when they began in Detroit. I'm going to say 61. I said mid-'60s. You're probably right, Ronnie. It's probably earlier than that. Oh, 57, way earlier than that. So the Pistons got to Detroit in 57, 11 years in Fort Wayne, and they went to Detroit, huh? I didn't realize that. So I'd have to look at Pistons between 57 and 70 because you got Lanier and Bing who cover it. So I'd have to look at, there must have been somebody who was great that we are forgetting. That's where who played in Detroit, not in Fort Wayne. That's the deal there. Here is Mark in Maryland, and he's with us here on Mad Dog Unleashed. Mark, good afternoon. How are you today?
Hey, how you doing, Chris? Hey, I just listened to that conversation there about the Pistons, and I wanted to jump in. Maybe Chauncey Billups or Kelly Tripucka, maybe. I don't know.
You could reward the Piston team with Larry Brown that won a title and then, of course, played in the finals in another year.
Yeah.
You could put Rasheed Wallace in there, but I don't think you would because of his antics. You could consider Ben Wallace, but he left. You have Sugar Bear, you have Ray Hamilton. I don't think you'd put him in there. I think you would put Billups in there from that crew, but he's not a Hall of Famer. That fifth Piston is very tricky. That's a good one.
That's a tough one there, no doubt. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the game here, the hockey game. I just accidentally kind of stumbled on it last night. So
you stuck with the whole game, the 2 o'clock in the morning?
Once I got into it, I had to find out who wanted to see who ended up winning the game. And I agree with you. The shootout left me a little cold seeing that, because they're deciding the game on something that rarely happens in a real game as a breakaway goal. I mean, it might happen like once a game, and there they are deciding the gold medal game on that. It just didn't seem right to me.
Did the U.S. I only saw the first period, and U.S. had a 1-0 lead. Did the USA dominate this game in the third in the overtime?
I don't know if they dominated, but they outplayed them. I thought. Once they got the game tied, it was like you kind of knew they weren't. All of a sudden, the defense just kind of takes over, and nobody came close to scoring in that overtime. So then they go to the shootout, which is just.
Now, what time did it end on the East Coast?
I think it was 2:30 or so.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a long time.
I mean, how in the world can an NHL hockey game, in a gold medal hockey game between two dominant countries ended at 3 o'clock in the morning? And it doesn't make any sense. They could put that on any time, forward or back, so people could watch it on the East Coast. That's ridiculous, for crying out loud.
Yeah, no, that's kind of crazy. I just kind of stumbled into it, but it's like you were saying too about the World. The World Cup's probably the biggest event in the sports world. With you consider all the countries that are involved in it, and they do the same thing with the penalty kicks, which is even worse because there's never a penalty kick in a soccer game, hardly ever. I mean. And they're deciding
and it's a lot easier to score in a penalty kick too. I hate the way they do it in the World Cup soccer. I know that's been debated how to handle that forever and ever and ever. The first thing I would do with the soccer rules, I am going to allow unlimited substitution because I think that is a major problem. You are not allowed to do that in soccer. Once you take a kid out, he can't go back in. And I think these teams are exhausted once they get into the overtimes. And they don't have the energy to score a goal, so they sit back and play defense and play for the penalty kicks. If you had the unlimited substitution and had a chance to, rest some people early in the game and maneuver with a bench and those kinds of things, I think you might have a little bit more offense late in the game. Players would be fresher. That's the first thing I would do. They're never going to change it. Those World Cup soccer rules and international soccer, they're never going to change it, and they're especially not going to change it when an American comes up with the idea, and I'm sure other people have mentioned that. But if you can substitute in every other, you can substitute in basketball every 5 seconds. Football players can come in out of the game every 5 seconds. You can take Brady out and put him back in. I don't know why you can't do that in the soccer. That to me doesn't make any sense. And I think at least if you did that, you'd have a better opportunity for some offense in some big spots because they wouldn't be as exhausted. Matt in New York, he's on Mad Dog Unleashed. Matt, good afternoon. How are you today?
Dog, how are you?
Fine, Matthew. Thank you. What's going on now? What do you have for me?
If you think last night was bad in terms of the gold medal thing with the shootout, if you go back probably 7-8 years ago, the Rangers in the NHL lost the last game of the season that was contingent on them making the playoffs or not based off a shootout. And it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth unless you were a Philadelphia Flyers.
Well, that was different. That was different because that was a regular season game. So that's a little different situation. I remember the game against the Flyers. I remember that, but that was a regular season game. You could have a regular season rule and a different rule in your postseason. That's not the worst. You can do that from that standpoint.
But you know what? I think that the thing you can say as a similarity is hockey fans aren't in love with the shootout regardless of whether it's regular season, postseason, or the Olympics. I think it was a gimmick that Bettman brought in the post-lockout to get the fans excited.
I think you're right.
But when you have an important game that can be a heavy outcome for something, fans would really rather see an overtime.
I understand that, but you can't decide there in Game 82. Well, we've done it this way for the first 81 games, so because the Rangers need to win the game outright to make the postseason, let's not do the shootout today. You can't do it that way. You got to be relatively consistent. Well, I said earlier with Bob Gallerstein, we were going to compare the updates today, and Gallerstein, who does a beautiful update,
I was so concerned that I
3:30.
decided not to prepare when I can't compete. Obviously,
you didn't do an update. That's your job to do a 4:30 update.
Well, we can. Yeah, but there are times when I'll come in here with a masterpiece. I feel like I'm coming in all guns blazing, like I'm Hemingway. I got everything written out, and then you go, you don't have to do an update. Let's talk about you. How are you today? And that's what we do. So therefore, I'm reciprocating in that. All
right, two things.
Yeah.
You want to chat? We will for a sec. 38 years ago, gold medal. Oh, not gold medal, but the USA game against Russia on that Friday night at Lake Placid. You're 15. You're 6. You had just turned 16. So you're living with mom and dad.
Well, no. Let's see. I was in. It was 1980. So let's say I was in.
It was in January of 81. No, it was January of 80.
It was 80.
So you were not. You were 15. I apologize.
Right.
No, you were 16. You had just turned 16. January is your birthday, right?
Correct.
And you were born in 64?
That is right.
So you were 16. So I know you probably had to go to bed early that night. You didn't eat your Brussels sprouts, so mom got mad. But you were living at home. You were not on your own.
I was in high school. That's usually what you do.
Well, I was in college.
At age 16?
I was 21, Steve.
Oh, right, but you were saying that you were living at home. So
well, I know I was at age 16, Steve. I was on my own. I was at Darrow School in Lebanon, New York.
Well, they had to do something with it. You were headed down a bad path.
I was in boarding school, so I was not at home. You were with mom and dad.
That's right.
So I don't know if you watched it.
No, I had something else to do that night.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Reading up on John Adams.
Well, but I was always bothered by McKay with the people with the American flags.
Yeah, I remember. Well, look, to me, I know you downplay it a little more. I think it's one of the great moments in sports history for myself, honestly. And I look back on that as obviously a fond time in my life. I remember being out to dinner. I was in Pennsylvania, actually, at the time, visiting relatives. A couple of days during the winter break.
You watched the game not knowing who had won.
Well, no. I mean, you remember the game was going to be taped later, and they put it on at 8 o'clock, so
Correct.
they were playing at the time we were eating.
So you had no idea.
So there was a guy in the restaurant who came out. It must have been a chef or something. He came out, and he had like this white towel, and he goes, "Hey, did you hear?"
Well, how did he know? Oh, it must have been a radio update or something.
I don't know, but he said the U.S. beat the Russians, and then so we were like, "Wow!" And so
you watched that event, knowing who won, and you still think it's one of the great things you've ever seen.
Don't you remember Frank Reynolds too? I think it was Frank Reynolds from ABC News, where they did the little news break, and he said, "Coming up next." The U.S.
Yeah, they really.
He goes, they did. Trust me, folks, you're not going to want to miss it. Hello,
they did.
They didn't lose 6-0. You know,
they did a very poor job of disguising that funnel.
Right.
So you want to put it on that level?
To me, it was one of the greatest things. It really was.
I'm not sure if I put it on that level.
That was a great week for me for a sports fan. You're going to think I'm lying.
The Sunday game was a great game against Finland when they were losing and they came back and won. But I apologize for interrupting.
Well, they lost. What do you mean? They were losing to the USSR also.
Yeah, I know that, but the Finland game, everybody thought it was a guaranteed win, and they were losing in that game.
Going into the third period.
Was it 2-0?
2-1, I think. But that was a great week for me personally for a sports fan because that week was the day, and you're going to laugh, that week was the same week that Iona, with Jim Valvano as the coach, beat Louisville at the Garden, and Louisville went on to win the national championship.
Oh, really? It was the same week?
Same week.
I didn't know.
I was trying to get the game on a transistor radio because I was so, I couldn't get enough of Iona.
I didn't know that. So Iona that same week with Luland beat Louisville at the Garden.
Killed them, blew them out.
Yeah, they beat them by like 20.
And Louisville went on to win the whole title. Darryl Griffith.
Okay, that wasn't in a postseason. That wasn't in a holiday tournament. It was just a regular.
It was late in the year. Weird. Where they would both be out of conference. But Valvano used to get the teams to come to the Garden, and it was packed. Everybody rooting for Iona. I mean, these schools went there, even though they went out of conference late in the year. That was their last loss. In fact, that whole season.
Louisville, yeah. And then they turned around and beat UCLA in the final. So that was a big week for you. Now, okay, that's one. Two, did you watch the game last night?
No, I didn't. I started watching a little of it, and I fell asleep. Out.
What
if it was on at an earlier hour? I would have made the effort.
I would have done this. I watched the first period and fell asleep.
And
now
they're actually replaying it now. You should watch it on NBC Sports.
Well, that's of course Eddie, who's trying to I don't know what he's doing. Can you put it on, Eddie? That'd be a nice idea. 220, Ed.
Because my back is to the TV.
Yeah, well, I mean, 220, good job on Steve. Hey, look at the TVs once in a while, Ed, and have an idea what you're doing here. Do you have a problem with the format with the shootout at the end for a gold medal?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'd like to. I don't know how realistic it is to expect them to play 6-7 overtimes if they have to, but you would think for a gold medal you'd want them to not have to go. It's the same thing with the World Cup soccer, the penalty kicks.
But again, it's a lot harder to score a goal in soccer than it is in hockey.
That's true.
They're going to score eventually.
Although
eventually the puck's going to go in the net in the hockey.
Right. Although the U.S. didn't score any in the shootout the other night in their loss to the Czech Republic.
They didn't. All right.
Yeah.
So do you have a problem with the Canadian player taking her silver medal off? I do, because they lost the game fair and square.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she was. I guess people are she's being disrespectful to the U.S. I think it's their overall bitter disgust that they didn't win. More than anything else.
It had nothing to do with the U.S. It has to do with the fact that they just lost. But that's being a sore loser. You lost the game. This is not Doug Collins, who got screwed, and Tom Henderson and Tom McMillan in '72, who have left these silver medals there in Lausanne,
in a vault,
in Switzerland,
and they don't want them.
This is not the same. So don't do that. That's not. So I thought she was wrong. Okay, are you okay with the gimmick at 4-4-4 in the overtime period, taking a person off the ice? Are you okay with that?
I mean,
I don't like that either myself.
Look, we see this in the NHL too, right? I mean,
not in the postseason.
No, not in the postseason.
No, you don't see it then.
But this is the same thing that applies to why we're even having a shootout. You should just play.
Okay, so you don't like any of the scenarios there. Are you shocked?
I would prefer they play until somebody scores.
And there is nobody in the building. Your thoughts on that for a second?
Yeah, I didn't really notice that as much as you did when I had it on last night. I clearly was not fully attentive to this event because I fell asleep probably 10 minutes after I started watching it. But yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and there's a lot of empty seats.
Steve, there is nobody there. NBC did not discuss this. You wouldn't expect them to. There's the U.S. first goal with 25 seconds going to power play. But there was nobody at this event. Nobody.
Yeah, and I told you for the men the other day there was nobody there too.
Look at this. There's nobody there, Steve. There was nobody there for the Czech game?
No, nobody.
No, there was no. You can't go by that first pick. There's nobody there at this game.
I'm saying it's 1 o'clock, so it's not even a primetime game there,
You'd think they could. It's a small arena, Collie. It's no more than 5,000 seats. I mean, you'd think they could sell it out. My goodness gracious. I was shocked by it myself. Shocked. Okay, so from that standpoint. So, yeah, are you happy the U.S. won? And
Sure. I mean, I think it's great.
All right. I could care less myself. I'm probably rooting for Canada.
That's you all over.
That is me all over. So you do remember 38 years ago. Where'd you watch the Sunday game? Yeah, you didn't.
I was also.
You certainly didn't go to Temple. Where'd you watch the Sunday game?
Didn't make it. That we skipped.
You skipped that one.
Yeah, no, we were in Pennsylvania. And we left right after the game and drove home, visiting my relatives.
I was in Lakeland, Florida, and I watched that game in the morning because we were playing in the SSC, Sunshine State Conference tournament, and we had a game at 11 or 12 o'clock at Florida Southern College, and Rollins College, the basketball team, stayed in a hotel somewhere in Lakeland, and we watched the game in the hotel lobby before we went to the arena to do the game.
Oh, so you played that afternoon.
Later in the morning. That game was like at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I thought it was like 11.
I don't think it was that late. Maybe it was. I thought it was earlier than that. And maybe you're right. Maybe it was 11. You know better than I do. It was on the East Coast time zone, so it probably wasn't an 8. But it wasn't. I thought it was in the morning.
Because they had the closing ceremonies after, so they probably had to finish all those events right before then,
I thought it was the middle of the morning. I guess I'm wrong. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was late morning. Anyway, that's where I watched the game.
Yeah. Oh, I remember it well.
And I do remember the game the week before where they lost to the USSR at Madison Square Garden. It was like 10-2 or something.
They got destroyed.
I remember that game very, very well.
Yeah, there was a lot of hype for that game for some reason.
And the move that was made for the Russian perspective is somehow that dopey coach took Tretiak out of the game.
Pulled the goalie.
After they had scored early, we scored right at the end of the period.
Yeah, I think they were on a power play, right?
And he took Tretiak, who was one of the world's famous.
They scored like 1 second to go in the second period to tie the game. Or no, wasn't that what it was?
I think it was the first period, but whatever it was, he took him out of the game.
That's right. I think it was the first period. You're right.
Took him out of the game
because I think they scored to make it 3-2 going into the third period.
The 72 challenge was far better than the Olympics because the USA, it was a much better competition. It was 8 games. I followed that very carefully. That was the NHL against Russia. That was tremendous. Now, you're going to get wrapped up because these are a bunch of amateurs who turn around and beat the big bad Russians, Cold War, and all those kinds of
Was it
things.
Derek Sanderson? Didn't he have a big play in that?
Paul
72
Henderson.
thing?
Paul Henderson won the game in overtime in Game 8, whatever it was. But it was a wonderful series. 4 games in the United States and 4 games in Russia. A great series, and a series that the NHL had to win, and they won 4 games to 3 to 1 tie, whatever it was. It was a tremendous series. Now, you like this one because it's good against evil. That's what you like.
Well,
about it.
I mean, it was because also there was no expectation. It was so unexpected. Remember, they tied the first game, and that was a game that they considered winnable. You know what I mean? And then they tied.
Did they lose a game to Czechoslovakia?
No, they beat Czech. They didn't lose any games during. They tied Sweden.
Tie?
They got a late goal, like in the third period.
I remember that.
With under a minute till they pulled the goaltender, and then they beat Czechoslovakia, which was considered huge. They were like, "Holy cow, this team's actually pretty good." And then they started beating up on everybody.
You loved it. I mean, it was the only sports illustrated of all time, by the way, with no
individual.
No description.
On
the cover.
Got it.
Which I believe is the case. So that you were wrapped up.
Oh,
in that.
I was so into it. Yeah, crazy.
Well, that's perfect age for you. 16 years of age. Perfect.
I couldn't get enough of it.
Couldn't get it, and you didn't know who Mark Johnson or Ken Morrow or Jim Craig or Mike Irizzoni.
Didn't know any of them.
You didn't know any of these guys.
Yeah.
And it's probably the highlight of, and Michaels has a lot of them. It's probably the highlight of Michaels' career.
It's probably his signature call of all time.
Do you believe in miracles? It's a great call. It's a great call. So 38 years ago today. All right.
Yeah.
You guys don't remember that, do you? Colin's too young, and Eddie doesn't know.
Miracle the movie's been on a lot on the movie channels lately. Yeah,
it's a good movie. I mean, I don't know how realistic it all is. He does a good job. Who plays Brooks?
Kirk Russell.
Yeah,
okay, he does a good job.
He did do a good job.
But I don't know. All
casting
the details.
Casting was pretty good, but who knows what's fact.
I'd have to go look. I haven't seen that movie forever.
I mean, they always say that he basically wanted to make them hate him so they could band together. That was his philosophy. I'm going to be the biggest AH that you know, and then we're going to sort of hate them together, and that'll build a bond.
And if you lose the Finland game, nobody's going to remember what you did against Russia. The great quote.
Yeah. You'll take it to your grave, is what he said, right?
You would know.
That's what Ruzioni always tells the story. He goes, "If you lose, it'll take you to your grave."
Boy, you are wrapped up. I didn't realize this.
Oh, I was into it. Yeah, absolutely.
At 16 in Pennsylvania, was your father into it?
Yeah, I mean, but that was the beauty of it. It's like, people that just weren't following sports was like, wow, this is an incredible thing.
Because I was at Rollins, so I don't even know if Tony was watching the hockey.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That was a crazy event.
And it was all because, the big bad Russia.
Right. Exactly. And of course the Olympics were being held on our soil.
Right, Lake Placid. The 60 was as significant too when we won in Colorado.
California.
It was in Squaw Valley, wasn't it? When we won 1-0, beat Russia in the gold medal game.
Right.
Well done, Steve.
Thank you, buddy.
Nice update. We take a timeout. We continue. I'm Mad Dog on